welcome back to this Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin, and joining me is Bob Kuster, the president of Boise State University. Thanks for staying.
Thank you.
We wanted to delve a little bit more into depth on some of these larger issues, and I wanted to ask you about what some have called kind of a careerism that has crept into discussion of higher ed. In other words, a degree is not worth it if it doesn't get you a job either really soon out of college or thereafter, and that you should be taking in school what you think you're going to be doing as a career. And you've written about this in some essays. One of yours says, "Say it often enough and a college education will become irrelevant." It's a concern of yours.
It really is. And just the other day I had a chance to attend a class and talk to some students, and the one message I left them with is, I said, look, you may think you know where you're going to wind up in life and career. Forget it. Oftentimes you wind up doing something you never thought you'd be doing.
What did you think you wanted to be?
I thought I was going to be a practicing attorney in the city of St. Louis for the rest of my life. That was where I was headed, and look where I am now. I mean, it's a vastly different approach to life, and I told them that. And my point was, don't get so narrow in your academic focus that you fail to get a broader perspective of life, a broader perspective of history, who we are on this planet, what our place in it is, and that's the liberal arts degree. It was the degree I took in a small liberal arts school many years ago. If you want to specialize, you get to the master's level, there's all kinds of opportunities to get a master's degree, whether it's an MBA or whether it's a master's degree in the social sciences or in education. But I think it's really important for students to focus on that broad, general curriculum at the undergraduate level and get an opportunity to learn more about the world in which they're going to be living in their careers.
So when you emphasize being a metropolitan research institution of distinction, that's not saying that the other aspects of the degree aren't as important. People should realize if not interested in science or math,
right,
it's still viable.
Sure. Well, you know, if you take the chair of our material science engineering program, Daryl Butt, he graduated from Penn State, and we had an arts and humanities programming board that we gathered faculty together, and Daryl showed up, and I was a little surprised. I said, "Wow, you know, you're an engineer, and here you are." He said, "Hey, I took every liberal arts course I could get my hands on as an undergrad at Penn State." So when you're talking liberal arts, maybe it's unfortunate that the word arts is there, because it tends to belie the fact that a liberal arts degree is about science as well, it's about math as well, in addition to history, philosophy, language, whatever else.
You wonder sometimes if students are not taking the major that they'd really be passionate about, something like French. Or drama,
right,
because somebody said you're never going to get a job with that,
right,
and then missing their passion altogether.
Well, the president of Bishop Kelly High School ought to be able to tell them a tale or two, because Rich Raimondi is a major in history from Stanford University, and he wound up running the printing division for HP for many years. I think he's a pretty good role model of what you can be in this country with a good, solid undergraduate liberal arts degree.
And I know Bob Locken has talked about that from White Cloud Analytics, that when
right,
he's looking for science people, presumably to work with him, he asks them, "What's the last book you've read?" And segueing here, Boise State does in fact have some critical relationships with the economy, with the surrounding economy. It's part of the engine of the economy now. You just had an iGEM grant of, I think, $700,000 that you've decided to spend in the computer sciences area, and that would match up students with businesses in some respects?
What it's going to do is hire some faculty to increase the output of computer science majors. The software engineering firms of Boise are saying, look, you're doing a great job of producing a limited number, and they're really good students. We have great response from the community when our students get into the companies, but it's like there's not enough. One of our local companies actually had to go set up an office in Boulder for the express purpose of picking off the graduates of the University of Colorado at Boulder. So, and this is really a great company here in Boise. So what we're doing is reinvesting in the computer science program here to connect with the community and serve the community in an important fashion. I'm very excited about the prospect of the iGEM program. As a matter of fact, We hope it's going to be included in the governor's budget again this year, and we hope the legislature will support it, and we'll put additional funding into the computer science department, which will give us even more faculty and more research opportunities to engage the community. We had 19 licensing agreements just this last year with local companies who are using the intellectual property that was developed in our College of Engineering and some of our sciences. That's a really important partnership that I'd say go 15 years back. Boise State was a school. I mean, it was just plain and simple a place where people went to school. Today, Boise State is a university that is serving the community in the state in so many different ways beyond workforce development. And these research partnerships and the ability to use the research that our faculty produce is one of the key ways we can enhance the economy.
How important to you was it as an administrator to have the Larry Selland College of Applied Technology morph into the College of Western Idaho? Those are people that are being trained, of course, to go directly into the economy.
That was one of my absolute musts in the first years of my presidency. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I couldn't understand coming out of the parking lot at the Taco Bell Arena and looking up at a diesel technology sign at the same time that we're producing a PhD in geosciences. It has to be very confusing for people to figure out, who are you? What is your mission and role? How can you be a community college or a technical college on the one hand and at the same time offering PhDs in the STEM disciplines? So we decided early on that it made good sense to create a community college. We had our detractors. There were people who thought, well, people within Boise State, what are you doing? This is our bread and butter. These are students we're giving away. And the first 2 or 3 years, we did lose quite a few students. I mean, if you look at the fact that there's like 9,000 students out at CWI, I guess the question is, how many of those would be at Boise State? We might be a school of 25, 26,000 students right now instead of 22,678. But it makes great sense because it focuses a new mission and role in the Valley on community and technical education, community college education and technical education. It frees us up then to be a metropolitan research university, to focus more on graduate programming, and also to increase our admission standards. We've done that regularly, and the quality of our student body is improving as a result
of that. The GPAs of the students coming in,
right.
And then also your retention is moving up, and you've got more full-time students, people who are not just commuting in and out and maybe taking a class here and there.
Right.
I read all of your State of the University addresses, and you talk, as soon as you came in, you started talking about the need for a community college. It happened. As soon as you, came in, you started talking about, we're going to start doing more fundraising. In that occur, you raised $185 million. You are not, you don't mince words. You say where you feel that the institution should be going. How is it that so much has happened in this shorter period of time? When people drive by, they see many more buildings than they used to, for instance. They probably think the state's doing pretty well, but in fact, your staff and others have helped raise that money.
Yeah.
So what has made all this happen in just 9 years?
Well, let's just take the buildings, because this is where I think the people who work with me never get the credit that I get, and they deserve it because it wasn't even my idea. In the second year I was here, one of my legal counsel, Kevin Satterley, came to me and said, you know what, this building proposition isn't going to get any better. They're not going to be giving us any money.
They meaning the state.
Right. We need a strategic facilities fee. And we established a strategic facilities fee that started at $25 a semester. Today it's at $225.
And you work with the students on that.
We did. The students went to the state board meeting with us and said, we think this is the only way to grow the university and to allow it to prosper. And over the years, every student administration, every student leader jumped on that program. That's responsible for 19 buildings on our campus. And so when I got here in 2003, I remember my job interviews. The people who I interviewed with, the staff, the faculty, there was this pent-up interest in moving up and moving out. And it's just there had to be some
So
direction.
you were channeling what was already
I
there?
think I was channeling what was already there. I think there was a lot of frustration in the community. I think for a number of years, there was a state board that put a damper on what Boise State was allowed to do. Boise State wasn't supposed to get too big for its britches. It was supposed to stay small. It was supposed to do this and that.
Not duplicate programs.
Exactly. That's all changed. Now the board understands, the governor understands that this university, Boise State University, is Boise's university. It's the university that serves the city. We're the only university whose mission and role is to serve the Treasure Valley. And I think with that mandate that's now so clearly delineated by the board, and with all of this pent-up interest and competence at Boise State, it was real easy for me to come along and just put the pieces together. But it was all there, Marcia. It really was.
Well, it doesn't come without ruffling some feathers, because the university that had a lot of the attention and does benefit from a different kind of funding structure.
Right.
Is the University of Idaho.
Right.
And it's no secret that there have been a few comments
Sure.
made and everything. There
Yeah.
were some feathers ruffled about the flagship issue, whatever.
Right, right.
But it seems like your intent was to raise the profile of Boise State within the university system here.
Absolutely. And I think if you take a look at our peers across the country, you will find that in Kentucky there is a flagship land-grant university called the University of Kentucky, but there's the University of Louisville that's growing at least as big as the University of Kentucky. Go to Cincinnati. University of Cincinnati is a large metropolitan university, and Ohio State is up to the north. No matter where you go, Salt Lake, the University of Utah, and then there's Utah State that is the land-grant. So in most states where there's a big city, and where there is a land-grant institution, you're always going to have this tension.
A little bit of friction.
But the good news is that, yeah, there's a little tension, but in the meantime, number one, as Dwayne Nellis and I often remind each other, and most importantly remind the people we're talking to, our faculties are working together every day of the week. I mean, we have faculties in many disciplines that have joint programming, they have joint grants from the National Science Foundation or whatever it is. And meanwhile, in the President's Council, which meets once a month, where the presidents sit around a table, if you walked into that meeting, you'd say, tension? Where's the tension? I mean,
So everything's smoothed over
Yeah.
after the comment about inebriation and everything.
yeah, well, that was a different subject. That was about a football game and about, people who needed to, obviously our fans were concerned about treatment and things like that. It was a totally different issue. And if people still want to go back and visit that, that's their business. But I think the most important thing is that here in the state of Idaho, there's a role for each of the three universities and the four-year Lewis Clark College. We all have different roles and missions. We all come together. We were just yesterday on the phone working with INL on a very interesting conversation about how we can become even more full-fledged partners of INL. And that's not uncommon on a regular basis for Dwayne Nellis and Art Valus and I to find ourselves working together in common pursuit of an Idaho goal.
You mentioned that you work with the students on this facility fee, which was very important in getting new structures because the state wasn't funding them. One area that I know is of concern is tuition. We've seen an increase in tuition year after year after year. I think you wrote almost tongue-in-cheek that it seems like there's never not a good excuse to.
That's right.
There's always
That's
an
right.
excuse to raise tuition.
Yeah.
But and the in-state tuition has been raised proportionately more than out of state. It's over $5,000 right now. First of all, do you think that we're going to see are we seeing potentially a bubble right now, and as education becomes more and more expensive, we're going to see fewer and fewer students taking a traditional degree? Are we reaching that point right now?
Well, first of all, let me remind folks that of the 15 western states, the state of Idaho's tuition is 13th. So there's lots of states ahead of us with higher tuitions. We're one of the bargain states when it comes to tuition. But to answer your question specifically, that does concern me. And I worry sometimes that our faculties do not quite appreciate how dramatically the landscape could change. And you could, in fact, where are these MOOCs going? Where are these massive open online courses going? If students figure out a way to start taking those, why won't they?
They're free right now.
Of course.
They won't be free probably forever.
And what happens when an employer decides that he really doesn't care about the Bachelor's of Arts degree in whatever it is? I'll take a badge in this and I'll take a badge in that. Give me 4 or 5 badges of specific competencies and forget your undergraduate degree. That's scary, and I don't think anybody should discount the fact that that could happen. I think it could. And I think, therefore, it's incumbent on us in large public universities like Boise State, but it also goes for the U of I and Idaho State, that we focus our energies on all aspects of the educational process, that we place as much focus on the arts and humanities as we do on the sciences and engineering. And I think you'll find across the state that we're pretty good at that.
And maybe work with the local industries to say, this is the value of a 4-year degree, as opposed to what you're talking about is the badges. People can go maybe get a certificate after taking a course online and present it to their employer.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
because it could help.
Of course it could. And community colleges do that regularly, and I wouldn't doubt that colleges of engineering will be doing more of that into the future. But in the meantime, when it comes to developing the well-rounded person who's going to be able to make decisions, to innovate, to be the future leader in business, healthcare, government, whatever it is, I really believe strongly that it takes a liberal arts education. Of course you can have a major, you can have 2 minors, you can have a double major, but the fact of the matter is we can't forsake this incredible education tradition that we've established in this country and that we've built. And I think those of us who have positions like mine, our job is to protect it and to preserve it. And that's what we do every time we march up to the state capitol and remind them that they just can't take the size of that higher education budget down any longer before all of a sudden higher ed is nothing more than a private good instead of the public good that benefits all taxpayers, whether you're going to college or not.
Do you think that we'll see an increase in tuition again?
You will. Yes, you will. Yeah, there'll be the state board is talking about limiting tuition to 3%. We at Boise State are actually talking about changing the way we charge for tuition. Historically, schools, I'm sure many of your viewers and those who are reading online know that when they went to school, they paid for 12 hours to be a full-time student, but then they could take 15 hours or 18 hours. Well, you could do that when you were being subsidized by the state. But as the state takes away the subsidy, we're going to have to price per credit hour. And we're going to have to price the product more realistically and specifically. And this is nothing new. I mean, there's public and private universities all over America, maybe even a majority, that charge on a per credit basis these days. We have not done that in the state of Idaho, and I think that's one of the next moves in this rearranging the business model, reinventing a business model that works as to how we finance higher education into the future.
I'm just thinking off the top of my head, does that make a disincentive for somebody who wants to go into the sciences or the languages where there are labs, and so they're taking more credit hours because of that, and they're going to have to pay more?
The lab sometimes, you can work it out so the lab is included in the price of the 3-hour course. We wouldn't want to use a disincentive on a science student. Also, you don't want to disincent students who can take more classes. So we're examining how to deal with this. The University of Tennessee has a specific program. I won't go into the details, but it tries to deal with students who are either smart enough or industrious enough to take 15 or 18 hours, and they figured out a way that you can do it without penalizing them. We're interested in looking at that.
We had a question from a viewer about what management books you like to read to understand better how to do your job.
Well, there's a guy named Collins who wrote a book called Good to Great, I think the name of it is. I hope I'm right about that. And I like his book. There's one message I took away from his book that is, if you're going to do a good job in your organization, you better have the right people on the bus. And I spend a lot of time coaching in my job, working with my direct reports, working with people, helping them be more productive, motivating them in many ways, and most importantly, what I would call drilling down. I think when you're overseeing a university, just yesterday I had lunch with a group of 10 to 13 students, and it was a focus group. I learned this from my political days. When I used to be in politics, we had to have focus groups of taxpayers who would come and tell us what the issues were. And I thought, well, if I did that in politics, why can't I use a focus group of students to tell me what's right and wrong with Boise State? So we gave them a free lunch yesterday, even though I told them there was no such thing as a free lunch. And then we basically said, all right, you tell me, what's your problem? And whether it was parking, whether it was bottlenecks, whether it was food, whether it was housing, I mean, we went through the list. And the management books I read, it's like Lincoln. They used to say that Lincoln managed by walking around. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And you don't even really need to walk around, but you do need to ask the right questions and drill down into the organization, and not just simply show up for the job every morning and say, well, I'm president. My job is to go to the legislature and ask for money. My job is to go to the donor and ask for money. My job is to know that a student who sets foot on our campus for the very first time gets a first-class treatment, gets an orientation program that's the best in the country. And I need to figure out a way that I can track how that's working. And we do that. I mean, we really try to drill down to get, last year the students told me there's no place to sit in the quadrangle. Now we've got all these benches with these backs and everything. All those things came from one of these focus groups where we just drilled down to see what is it that's wrong. Internet access is a big deal on the campus these days. Of course, these students are downloading movies, they're downloading all kinds of stuff that's just
hopefully the show
wiping out, the show, wiping out the broadband. But the good news is that it is important to focus on the little things that if you ignore them, before you know it, you're going to develop a reputation as a school that doesn't care, and we never want to let that happen.
And from a management perspective, how do you deal when you make the tough decisions with, I remember seeing signs all around town, fire Custra, because it had to do with this Blameyer.
Right.
Do you just put them, you just walk by them?
Yeah, that never really bothers me much. As a matter of fact, somebody told me a long time ago, hey, look, if somebody isn't complaining, you're not doing a good job. And so when I saw these signs, I still see these signs, and I don't know who's putting them up, and if they think they're bothering me, all it does is remind me that I did my job. That's what it does. Every time I see something like that, I'm thinking, well, apparently I'm doing my work. And as long as the state board that hired me and has the ability to fire me at any point thinks that I'm doing my job, then that's really all I need to know. I just think it's a great opportunity. I do think that one of the toughest things about a job is to have to face up to somebody who's not performing or there's a problem. And I've had to do that more than once. And it's never easy, and you try to do it as delicately as possible. Most importantly, you try to provide a cushion for somebody so there's time for them to find something else to do. But that all goes with the job. When I was in politics back in the state senate in the state of Illinois, one day I looked in the mirror and I said, someday I'd like to run a really complex organization and see if I could pull it off. And when you're a legislator, you have responsibility for your own voting record, and that's about it. Maybe 2 employees. It's not exactly a complicated job. But when you have the numbers of people you cited earlier at a university, and any of those can go wrong on any given day, it is massive responsibility. So when I took this job, my goal was, I want to see if I can do this right. And I've made some mistakes. Who wouldn't make a mistake in a job like this, showing up 365 days a year? But overall, I really think I've proven to myself that, in fact, if you are dedicated to what you do and you believe in what you do, and you are absolutely sincere with people about what it's going to take to get to the objective you've set, you can be successful. And I think Boise State University and all of the people I work with across the college, in the colleges, the deans, the chairs, they all come to work devoted to improving the lives of our students. And that's a very gratifying feeling to take away at the end of the day.
And of course, now there's people that want you to go back to politics.
And that'll never happen, I guarantee you, Marcia. That day will never come. My wife says, you know, she'll come and visit me if that day ever comes, because she's not going to stand for it, that's for sure. And she gets the dog, which is the biggest part of the problem. So, no, I know we've joked about it. Governor Andrus and others have, from time to time, joked with me about, well, you've got to get on the ballot. But I've been there and done that. Plus the fact that, you know, when I was in politics back in the 80s and the 90s, it was a different ball game. It was a totally different ball game.
I was going to say the gridlock that you experience now versus what you can get done.
Oh,
in
I was
other
telling you about this radio show I did of the last great Senate with this guy describing the U.S. Senate in the 70s when you had these bipartisan friendships across the aisle, and they'd come together and they'd look out for each other, they'd protect each other. And in one case, there was the guy told a story of Senator Dirksen telling Senator Bai from Indiana, now those are from different parties, how to get reelected. You know, it's like, what's that all about? Where do you find that in the U.S. Senate today, or any other legislative body? So I really enjoy what I'm doing. I love working with legislators on the Democrat and Republican side. We really enjoy the relationship we have with the Idaho legislature. And I'll tell you another thing about the Idaho legislature that I think is really special is that, you know, when I was in the Illinois legislature, it was on the borderline of being a professional legislature. We were in session a lot, and we were paid a lot. Well, a lot. We weren't paid a lot. I was paid $28,000.
In those days.
In those days, $28,000 is more than what, you know, we're paid here. But this is a true citizen legislature. This is one of the I don't think people understand that. This is one of the last of its kind in the country. This is a true citizen legislature that comes in for 3 or 4 months every year, does their business, goes back home to take care of their families and their businesses and whatever. There's not many of these left. I mean, in California, I think the senators and House members are making as much, if not more, than the members of Congress. They're enormous, at least $200,000 a year, I think, to be a state senator.
They should at least be coaching a football.
Exactly. So I think these legislators deserve a lot of credit from the standpoint of they're poorly paid and they spend long hours. Taxpayers would never believe that these folks are at work at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're never out of there before 6 at night, and then they start their evening rounds of receptions, taking care of all the people who come to town to lobby them for one thing or another. Idaho legislature is a pretty unique place. It really is.
But you don't want to go there.
No, I don't want to go there. I've been there, done that.
Governor.
Been there, done that.
Well, thank you for taking time
My pleasure.
to talk further about your priorities for Boise State University. You've been listening to Bob Costra, the president of Boise State University, and I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in to this Dialogue Web Extra.